So we'll start with the Florida news. Jon Sumrall is next head coach of Florida. I believe the contract's like $7.5 million a year was the deal that was reported there. So big pay for him. Again, a name that has been talked about for quite some time as an up-and-comer in the SEC. Former SEC assistant both at Ole Miss and at Kentucky. Played football at Kentucky. Head coach at Troy, was very successful there, turning them around after 3 straight losing seasons to win a conference title in his first year. Takes over at Tulane and for Willie Fritz. And I know, look, the double-digit win seasons haven't happened just quite yet. Although I think, they go 10-2 this year. I think that's right. So, I mean, they won a bunch of games this year. So he got the double-digit win season this year, playing for a conference title, potentially could be in the playoff. He's continued that success there at Tulane. Everybody has said this is the next guy in the SEC. Like, that's sort of been the perspective on him, that he is, as SEC a coach you can find, good recruiter, just a good ball coach, and a guy who gets his teams to win football games. Florida fans are very concerned that this is a defensive version of Billy Napier. I understand those concerns. I also think Sumrall's a really good coach, and that all these schools wanted him for a reason, which a lot of schools wanted Billy Napier too. I think this is a good move, and I know Florida fans are freaking out over another G5 head coach from the state of Louisiana, and they're ready to move on from Scott Strickland. They think he completely blew this with missing on Lane. I think it's a good move, though. What are y'all's thoughts?
It's a pretty good move.
Yeah. I think overall with this hire, I understand the Florida fans' frustrations because, like you said, Andrew, another Group of 5 coach from the state of Louisiana. Now, he has proven his worth at 2 of these Group of 5 schools in Troy and Tulane. Tulane's kind of been that launch pad for a while. And similar to Ole Miss, I do think it kind of sucks that you could be looking at a team in Tulane that is playing without its head coach in the CFP and just with Sumrall taking this job. But at the same time, I don't think we should be allowing the G5 into the college football playoff. Just with the way this thing is structured, like they're just not going to be able to compete with everybody else at the top here in the future. That's just the sad reality for those schools. But no, Sumrall, he's done a good job there. And the other thing that I think is bothering Florida fans about this is you just stop talking to Lane Kiffin. That's part of the problem. I don't know if it was Kiffin not being interested in them or it was Scott Strickland not having interest in Lane Kiffin. I don't know what it was there. But
I think Kiffin was not very interested.
Yeah.
That's not reporting. That's just all, and I'm not to cut you off, I'm sorry, but all of the reporting nationally and from LSU and from Ole Miss was that Florida was just really not in the mix there. The only people saying Florida was in the mix were a handful of Florida insiders. Yeah. I think Florida just was never fully in it. I think, obviously, look, they went and visited Gainesville. His family did. They considered. But I think Florida was just not really a player for Lane.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that's one reason why the fans are pretty upset. But no, overall, I think it's a solid hire, just what he's been able to do in the Group of 5. And the fact that he's done it at 2 schools, too, going from Troy to Tulane, which is one of the highest rungs in Group of 5 football right now. You've been winning at both levels that you've been at in the past, and now you can go to Florida and see what happens. Now, I guess the big question is what you do in the transfer portal. How can you retain some of these guys? Because honestly, despite everything that happened with Billy Napier, this group is very bought into Florida. I think the question now is how can you make it gel if those guys are going to stay?
Jackson, any thoughts?
Yeah, because it's like Sumrall at Florida, I could see this working out a lot better than Napier at Florida did. Now, are we going to be seeing 10-win seasons in Gainesville again? Are we going to see Florida dominate recruiting? That's going to be a lot of questions there. Can we see the Gators get the job done with Sumrall? Well, they've got a better chance than they ever did with Napier. That I can tell you for sure.
I like the move. Look, I think Sumrall is a really good coach. He's someone that Mississippi State was considering a couple years back coming out of Troy. When they ultimately hired Jeff Lebby, Sumrall was one of the finalists for the job. And it didn't happen because I think part of it was like he had a he had a whole thing of like he wanted a clause in his contract that if Kentucky comes open, I can just leave and go take the Kentucky job. And Mississippi State was not going to allow that. I don't think that's going to be a thing anymore. I think clearly he's not leaving Florida to go back to the alma mater. He will.
Why would anybody want to leave Florida for Kentucky? Like, unless it's basketball.
It was a big thing for him a couple of years ago. That's passed him by. At this point, he's too big for Kentucky at this point. So that was part of the holdup. Also, I think State was just really obsessed with the idea that we had to get an offensive-minded coach in, and he's a defensive guy. But I think he's a really good coach. I think he recruits well. I think he gets his team really fired up and just has a team that's pretty – I understand Tulane took a couple losses this year that they took one loss, the UTSA loss, that had people questioning them. But, like, he just wins a lot of football games and I think fits the mentality. And I think he's been a good coach on game days. Like, we'll see the recruiting side of it, how that plans out. But I think guys want to play for him. But with Napier, like it wasn't players, it was the game day coaching. And I think with Sumrall, like you were getting a ball coach in there with all the trust that he's going to be able to get players. So I think it is a really good move for them. I understand the concerns about the G6 coach and why they wanted a sitting power conference coach. But I think he will do a really nice job. Now, I think part of why the Auburn thing was a holdup was wanting to have his own staff in place. And I know that's one of the things people question is like, well, can you build an SEC caliber staff? His coaching staff has been successful at 2 straight stops in the Southeast. And I think some of those guys do. I know he's at least got the SEC experience. So it's not like he doesn't know what an SEC staff is supposed to look like. Okay. I think he's a guy that can come in and be successful. I think he's got a lot of good players on that Tulane roster that'll come and join. And I know that's going to be another thing that terrifies Florida fans because Napier brought a lot of guys from ULL with him. But I don't know. I think it's a good move. And I think if you're Florida, you might have lucked out with it not being Lane. And again, I think Lane could be awesome in Baton Rouge. I think it's going to work out really well for them with Sumrall.
Yeah.
All right.